That's the U.S. national debt as of mid-2025. It's a number so big, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. It's a figure that looms over our entire economy. But this isn't just a number for economists and politicians to argue about. This is a crisis with a real cost that you're already paying. So what does this staggering number actually mean for you? Well, for starters, your personal share of this debt is over $106,000. Think about that for a second. Without ever signing a loan document, you're on the hook for a six-figure sum. This isn't some abstract problem for another day. It's a ticking time bomb at the heart of the American economy, and it's directly threatening your wallet, your future, and the essential services you count on. Like Social Security, the real cost isn't just about trillions of dollars. It's about the stability of our country. Welcome to MBA in Minutes, your spot to get a deeper understanding of complex business concepts in a bite-sized, digestible format. It's your MBA, simplified. So how on earth did we get here? How did the wealthiest nation in the world end up buried under a mountain of debt that's now bigger than its entire annual economic output? To get it, you first need to know the lingo. Every year, the federal government spends more money than it collects in taxes. It runs a budget deficit. To cover the difference, the government has to borrow money, kind of like a family using a credit card for expenses they can't quite cover. It does this by selling treasury bonds to investors here at home and all over the world. The national debt is just the grand total of all those yearly deficits piled on top of each other. And for nearly a quarter century, the United States has been on a borrowing binge. The U.S. has run a deficit every single year since 2001. This isn't a Republican or a Democrat problem. It's a structural one. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, the 2008 financial crisis, major tax cuts, and the massive stimulus spending during the COVID-19 pandemic all poured gasoline on the fire. Between 2019 and 2021 alone, federal spending shot up by about 50%. The result? The debt has absolutely exploded. It's now over 124% of our gross domestic product, or GDP. To give you some perspective, the last time it was this high was right after World War II, a moment of global crisis. But unlike back then, today's debt isn't expected to go down. It's on a steep upward path because we have a fundamental mismatch between what we've promised in government services and what we're willing to pay in taxes. We are consistently spending far more than we bring in, and that gap is only getting wider. Okay, so the number is huge, but why should you really care? You should care because this debt is no longer a quiet passenger in our economy. It's in the driver's seat, and it's steering us toward a cliff. The consequences are already hitting home in 4 critical ways. First, the interest rate time bomb. Just like with a credit card, the government has to pay interest on its debt. For years, this wasn't a huge deal because interest rates were at rock bottom. Well, those days are over. As the debt has ballooned and the Federal Reserve has hiked interest rates to fight inflation, the cost to service our debt has skyrocketed. In 2025, the United States is projected to spend over $1 trillion just on interest payments. Let that sink in. That is more than we spend on national defense. It's more than we spend on Medicare. Interest on the debt has become the second largest government expense, trailing only Social Security. Every single dollar spent on interest is a dollar we can't use to rebuild roads, fund cancer research, or secure our social safety net. It's just money down the drain, paying for things we already bought. This creates a vicious cycle. More debt leads to higher interest payments, which adds right back to the debt, forcing us to borrow even more. Second, the crowding out of America's future. This leads us to the next crisis, the crowding out of everything else. The federal budget is a zero-sum game. When one piece of the pie gets bigger, the other pieces have to get smaller. With interest payments eating up a huge share of federal revenue, about 15% in 2025, there's simply less money for everything else. Think about the programs that define the American promise. Social Security and Medicare already face huge funding problems as the population ages. About 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every single day, putting immense strain on these systems. The massive debt makes it almost impossible to have a serious conversation about fixing them. In fact, Social Security's own surpluses from past years were already spent by the government, which basically left an IOU in the trust fund. On top of that, having so much debt handcuffs our ability to respond to the next crisis, whether it's a natural disaster or another pandemic. We're losing our financial flexibility and leaving the next generation with a bigger mess and fewer tools to clean it up. Third, the hidden tax of inflation. A lot of people don't connect the dots between massive government borrowing and the price of their groceries. But when the government injects trillions of borrowed dollars into the economy, like the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, it can cause what economists call demand pull inflation. Simply put, you have way too many dollars chasing way too few goods, and that pushes prices up for everyone. Now, to be fair, that spending wasn't the only cause. Global supply chain chaos also played a big role. But to fight that inflation, the Federal Reserve has to use its bitter medicine, raising interest rates. Higher rates make it more expensive for you to get a mortgage, a car loan, or a business loan. It cools down the whole economy. So while stimulus might feel good in the moment, the long-term price is the erosion of your paycheck's buying power. Fourth, the threat to economic growth and your job. Maybe the most dangerous impact of all is how a huge national debt quietly strangles the economy. When the government borrows on such an epic scale, it competes with private businesses for investment money. This is what economists mean by crowding out. It drives up borrowing costs for companies that want to build new factories, innovate, and create jobs. Less private investment means slower growth, which leads to wages that don't keep up and fewer opportunities for workers. And then there's the risk of a confidence crisis. Right now, the world still sees U.S. debt as a safe investment. But there's a tipping point. If investors here and abroad start to doubt America's ability to pay its bills, they could demand much higher interest rates or stop buying our debt completely. That could trigger a devastating financial crisis, shake global markets, and threaten the US dollar's role as the world's primary currency. That's not just an economic theory. It would mean a sudden, painful drop in our standard of living. So, how do we fix this? The answer is simple to understand, but not easy to do. There are no magic tricks. To get the debt under control, we have to fix the basic mismatch between spending and taxes. That means we have two levers to pull. We can cut spending, or we can raise taxes. On the spending side, the conversation has to start with the biggest drivers of the debt: Social Security and Medicare. These programs, along with rising interest payments, are on autopilot to consume more and more of our economy. Real reform would require true bipartisan courage to do things like adjust eligibility ages or change benefit formulas. And all of those options are politically toxic. On the tax side, the government simply isn't bringing in enough money to pay for all its promises. That means revenues will likely have to go up, whether that's by letting old tax cuts expire, raising rates, or closing loopholes. And just like with spending cuts, any talk of raising taxes is met with immediate political backlash. The hard truth is there is no painless way out of this. Any real solution will have to involve a mix of both spending cuts and higher taxes. But for decades, our politicians have chosen to kick the can down the road. The Congressional Budget Office projects that if we stay on this path, our debt could soar to 166% of GDP by 2054. We are walking toward a fiscal cliff, and choosing to do nothing is a choice, one with incredibly severe consequences. This isn't a problem that can be solved overnight. It's a crisis that was decades in the making. But understanding what's at stake is the first step. This $36 trillion number isn't just Washington's headache. It's a direct threat to your financial security, the value of your savings, and the country we're leaving to our kids. The path we are on is completely unsustainable. It leads to a future with a weaker economy, a frayed social safety net, and a nation less prepared for the challenges of tomorrow. The time for ignoring the numbers is over. The bill is coming due. Look, this is heavy stuff, but staying informed is how we start to demand accountability and drive change. If you want to understand more about the critical economic issues shaping our world, make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching.